The alarm rang at 6 a.m., cutting through the silence of the early morning. For a few seconds, I stayed under my blanket, staring at the ceiling and wishing I could sleep a little longer. The room was still dim, and the cool morning air made it difficult to leave the comfort of my bed. But like every other day, responsibilities were waiting. I slowly sat up, stretched my arms, and turned off the alarm. Outside my window, the sky was beginning to brighten. Birds were already singing, and somewhere in the neighborhood, a rooster crowed proudly as if announcing the beginning of another busy day. After washing my face and brushing my teeth, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked sleepy, but I knew that would change after a cup of tea. I walked to the kitchen, where my mother was already awake. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I replied with a smile. The smell of fresh tea filled the room. I sat at the table while she poured a steaming cup for me. The warmth of the tea slowly woke me up. For a few peaceful minutes, I enjoyed the quiet morning before the rest of the world became busy. After breakfast, I returned to my room. I checked my phone, replied to a few messages, and looked at the day's schedule. There were several tasks waiting for me. Some were important, some were routine, and some could probably wait another day. Still, I wanted to make progress. By 8 a.m., I sat in front of my computer. The screen lit up, and within seconds, I was surrounded by emails, notifications, and unfinished projects. Sometimes technology makes life easier, but other times, it feels like an endless list of things demanding attention. I opened my work and started focusing. The first few hours passed quickly. I answered emails, organized files, and completed small tasks that had been waiting for days. Every time I crossed something off my list, I felt a small sense of achievement. Around 10 a.m., I took a short break. I walked outside into the yard. The sun was shining brightly now. Children were heading to school, shopkeepers were opening their stores, and motorcycles passed by on the road. Everyone seemed to have somewhere important to be. I stood there for a few moments, simply observing. Life was moving all around me. An elderly man slowly walked past my house, carrying a bag of vegetables. Two friends rode bicycles while laughing about something. A woman watered the plants in front of her home. These were ordinary moments, yet somehow they felt beautiful. I returned inside and continued working. As noon approached, I felt hungry. My concentration began to fade. Numbers, words, and computer screens are much harder to deal with when your stomach is reminding you that lunch is overdue. At 1 p.m., I joined my family for lunch. The dining table became a place of conversation. We talked about current events, family news, and small things that happened during the morning. My father shared a funny story. My mother laughed. I laughed too. It wasn't a remarkable meal. There was no celebration, no special occasion, just family sitting together. But sometimes those simple moments become the most meaningful memories. After lunch, I returned to my room. This was usually the hardest part of the day. The afternoon always seemed slower. The energy of the morning was gone, and evening still felt far away. I sat at my desk again and tried to focus. For a while, everything went well. Then, distractions arrived. I checked social media. 5 minutes turned into 15. 15 turned into 30. Before I realized it, nearly an hour had passed. I sighed. This happened more often than I like to admit. I closed the unnecessary tabs and forced myself back to work. The next couple of hours were productive. I completed the project that had been bothering me for several days. The satisfaction of finally finishing it felt wonderful. Around 4 p.m., I decided to go for a walk. The afternoon sunlight painted everything in golden colors. The streets were busier than in the morning. Students were returning home from school. Vendors were selling snacks along the roadside. I walked slowly, no destination, no deadline, just walking. Sometimes I think people underestimate the power of a simple walk. It gives the mind room to breathe. As I walked, I thought about my goals. Some were small, others were ambitious. There were skills I wanted to learn, projects I wanted to complete, and dreams I hoped would one day become reality. The journey felt long, but every day carried me a little closer. A few neighbors greeted me as I passed. I exchanged smiles and short conversations. One of them asked about my work, another commented on the weather. Nothing extraordinary happened, yet the friendliness reminded me that community matters. When I returned home, the sun was beginning to set. The sky turned orange, pink, and purple. I stood outside for a moment, watching the colors change. No photograph could fully capture it. Some moments are meant to be experienced rather than recorded. Soon evening arrived. I freshened up and sat down with a cup of tea. This was one of my favorite parts of the day. The pressure of work was over. The night still held possibilities. I opened a book and began reading. The story transported me into another world. For an hour, I forgot about schedules, deadlines, and responsibilities. I simply enjoyed the journey of the characters. Reading has always felt like a conversation between minds, separated by time and distance. Someone writes words, someone else reads them, and suddenly, two strangers understand each other. At 7 p.m., dinner was ready. Once again, the family gathered. The television played softly in the background while we talked about our day. Everyone had their own stories, some exciting, some ordinary, some frustrating, some funny. Together, they created the rhythm of family life. After dinner, I helped clean up and then returned to my room. Night had fully arrived. The neighborhood became quieter. The sounds of the day slowly faded. This was the time I usually spent learning something new. Sometimes I watched educational videos. Sometimes I practiced skills. Sometimes I researched topics that interested me. Learning has a unique kind of satisfaction. Every new piece of knowledge feels like adding another tool to a growing collection. Tonight, I spent time improving my skills and exploring ideas for future projects. The more I learned, the more possibilities I saw. Around 9:30 p.m., I took another short break. I checked my phone again. Friends had sent messages, some shared jokes, others discussed plans. I replied to a few conversations and laughed at several memes. The internet can be chaotic, but it also keeps people connected. After that, I reviewed my day. This had become a habit. I looked at what I accomplished. I considered what could have gone better. I planned for tomorrow. The process wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. Some days were highly productive, others were not. But as long as I continued moving forward, even slowly, I felt satisfied. At 10:30 p.m., I prepared for bed. I brushed my teeth, turned off unnecessary lights, and organized my desk. A clean workspace made the next morning easier. Before sleeping, I looked out the window one last time. The night sky stretched above the neighborhood. A few stars were visible. The streets were mostly empty. The world seemed calmer now. I thought about how ordinary the day had been. No major events, no dramatic adventures, no life-changing discoveries, just another day. Yet, when I looked closely, I realized something important. A day does not need to be extraordinary to have value. The morning tea, the family conversations, the productive work, the afternoon walk, the evening reading, the quiet moments of reflection. Together, they form the life, and life is often built from small moments rather than grand events. Many people spend years waiting for something extraordinary to happen. A huge success, a perfect opportunity, a dramatic turning point. But happiness often hides in ordinary places, in shared meals, in peaceful mornings, in laughter with friends, in learning something new, in watching a sunset, in finishing a task you once thought impossible. As I lay in bed, I thought about tomorrow. It would probably look very similar. The alarm would ring, the sun would rise, work would wait, responsibilities would return, and once again I would move through another ordinary day. But perhaps that was not a bad thing, because every ordinary day offers another chance to improve, to learn, to connect with people, and to move a little closer toward our goals. The world often celebrates big achievements, yet most lives are shaped by consistent routines, by showing up every day, by doing the work, by caring for family, by continuing even when motivation fades. That realization brought a sense of peace. I closed my eyes. The sounds of the night became softer. My thoughts slowed. The events of the day drifted away. And as sleep finally arrived, I felt grateful, not for an extraordinary life, but for an ordinary one, filled with countless small moments that quietly made it meaningful. The day ended. Tomorrow's story was waiting to begin.